may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of GTF, Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia, and before we start, I want to say thank you to everyone who has reached out with their condolences and best wishes on the passing of my mother. We put her to rest yesterday, and it's always tough when you lose someone that you love so much. But all of the comments and well wishes and condolences that I received really helped with the difficult time. So appreciate that. And today's my birthday, and I appreciate everybody who's reached out to wish me happy birthday. So with that, let me bring in my good buddy, Greg Gabriel. Greg, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I didn't know it was your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
How old are you, 75?
64. I feel like 75. Trust me.
One more year and you're on Medicare, or Medicaid, or whatever the hell they call it.
Whatever they call it, I welcome it. Reduce those medical bills.
Well, I don't know if it reduces it. Trust me.
Oh, really? Well, you would know better than me because you've been on it for a few years now, right?
Yeah, 6.
Let's not give away too much information. Greg, I am really looking forward to this show because a lot has happened over the last few days, and I haven't been able to keep on top of stuff. So, you're going to be doing most of the leading on this stuff. We were supposed to do a show last Friday. Unfortunately, with the developments that happened, we had to postpone it. So let's get caught up on things. How about if we start?
I got to say one thing first. I had a great weekend.
Oh, tell us.
Well, I got to tell you what happened. So I get up Saturday morning, and I usually get up early, 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I got my own little routine, and then I go to the gym, catch a workout or whatever. But when I, come out of the room when I'm walking downstairs, I'm still like half asleep. So and supposedly two of my grandkids, actually my wife's grandkids were going to be over here coming Friday night, but they're supposed to get here late. They only live a mile away, but they're going to get here late. And I thought they were going to be sleeping, but when I come out of the room, the one bedroom door was open, and I go, wonder why Maya's up this early. Mm-hmm. So I get to the top of the stairs and I look down, and there's these two people down in my family room. And I'm like totally in a daze, and then I focus in on it. And it's my two daughters. They flew in late Friday night, and my 1-year-old grandson to surprise me for Labor Day weekend. I had no idea. This has been in the works between my daughters and my wife for 2 months.
Outstanding.
Yeah, I had no freaking idea. I was like, I'm just looking at it and I go, what are you doing here?
Oh, gosh, that is so great. So how many grandchildren is it, and how many were there?
Only one grandchild was there, the youngest one, Jace, who is 16 months old. But we got a dozen.
Wow, a dozen. Well, I got one, so I got a long way to go. My daughter's got to start.
As I keep saying it, I probably said to you already, grandchildren cost more than real kids.
Yeah, I'm already saving. All right, let's get started with all of the roster developments that happened over the past week. What is your overall feeling on the 53-man roster and I think it was 6 new players that Ryan Poles brought in after that initial roster announcement of the 53?
That did not surprise me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you why. I had a conversation with Ballard, and this goes way back. And, he was telling me he was in Kansas City for John Dorsey's first year as general manager. Chris was director of player personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And Dorsey signed 5 or 6 people off the waiver wire that first year of Andy Reid's reign in Kansas City. And Ballard did the same thing in Indianapolis. You really scout the other teams very well. You think you're pretty up to date with what you have. And if you think there's better out there, you're going to go out and get them. Now, you could be wrong, obviously, but if you are wrong, you're going to, just cut them loose. It's not like some people are under the misconception that if you claim a guy off waivers, you got to keep him on the active roster for a certain amount of time. And that's not true. You can cut him the day after you claim him if you want. It's if you poach a player off a practice squad, you have to keep him on the active roster for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference. But I like all the claims. You're going to lose me. Well, you won't lose me. I'll lose you because I'm going to go to the roster.
Okay.
And, there's a bunch of good names. Start with a rookie corner, Josh Blackwell from Duke.
Yeah.
Who is a sub 4.4 guy, can jump out of the building, played primarily in the slot for the Eagles and did a pretty good job. So when you look at the play he had during the preseason, now granted, when we see preseason football, we don't see practice. You're just seeing the games, but in the games he played pretty good. Then you get down into the defensive line, and we got Kingsley Jonathan, really interesting guy. Buffalo's loaded at the defensive end department.
Mm.
And this is a rookie from Syracuse, and he's strong, very explosive, comes off the edge. He had, I'm not sure if he had a sack or just a bunch of pressures in the preseason, but I know he hit the court because I looked at, all the preseason games, and he got a number of pressures and hits on the quarterback. Interesting guy. I think he plays the run a little better because he's a little bit more stout at the point of attack than Dominique Robinson is right now. But this kid's got some upside, plays really, really hard. He runs pretty good.
Good.
And the receiver, I didn't know that much about, Smith Marset from the Vikings. So I went back and, looked at the Minnesota tape and from the preseason and a little bit from last year. Not a big guy in that he's got kind of a narrow frame. He's 6'1", 185 pounds, but he can run and he can jump. He had some catches at Iowa a year ago where they were just outrageous catches, one-handed catches. He does return work, kickoff and punt. Didn't do, I think he just did kickoff in college, but he did punt and kickoff for the Vikings. And he's a pretty good return guy. Now, is he going to be the number one guy? I think that depends on the health of Velus Jones this week. Mm-hmm. But they've got so many darn returners on this team. And I think that's actually kind of interesting because remember in some previous years if the returner went down, you were like, who's going to return kicks? Right. They got about a half a dozen right now.
That's great.
And guys who have done it in the league, done it in college, and have done it fairly successfully. So the tight end they picked up from the Jets, and this guy was claimed by 4 teams. So wow. that tells you how interesting he is.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't caught a lot of passes in his career. Trayvon Wesco, he's from West Virginia. Mm-hmm. He's 6'3", he's about 265, 270. That guy will knock the dog shit out of you as a blocker. And that's what he is. He is a pure Y. Now, they sometimes line him up, but the Jets did, in a flex situation and had him blocking on the move and did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
As a receiver, he's a short-range receiver. He's never going to get open deep. He doesn't run like that, but he's going to help the run game because he's almost like having another tackle in there, even though a light one at, say, 265, 270. But he's, just an excellent, excellent blocker. So I think that's actually, they lost O'Shaughnessy to a non-football illness and had to cut him. And I think when you bring this guy in, you've actually upgraded the position.
A couple of people in the chat room, including CJ and Michael Halatek, want to know, were there any surprise cuts in your opinion? People that were cut and you said, well, I expected him to stick around. I know we had talked about the guy you thought was going to be a 3-tech. What's his name? Mario Edwards.
That one was a surprise. But then when you say he never played in the preseason, not one snap.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the question is, was he somebody that was buying in?
Mm-hmm.
And, we're never going to know the answer to that.
Right.
But if that's the case, now there's a couple other guys we got to talk about.
Sure.
Alex Leatherwood.
Yeah.
Picked him up. Now, this guy was a first-round pick a year ago with the Raiders. Totally busted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you go back and you look. It's interesting because a guy who scouted for the Raiders, no longer there,
mm-hmm.
And a person that I've known for probably a good 25 years, he had tweeted out, because Alex Leatherwood was a damn good left tackle at Alabama, and that's where he played. Yet the Raiders never put him on the left side. Played strictly on the right side. Now, it's hard. Some people can do it, especially if they have experience playing on both sides. But it's like a right-handed hitter trying to get off and bat left-handed when he hasn't done it before.
Mm-hmm.
So, because your footwork is the opposite of what you've been doing. And your hand use is just differently because you're punching a little bit differently and et cetera. But looking at him, he looks like he's totally lost confidence. He never had problem with speed. Mm-hmm. When you go back and you look at 2020 Alabama tape, he never had problem with wide speed.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't block wide speed for the Raiders last year. It was awful. And now, is it confidence? I think confidence is playing into it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm throwing a dart at the wall. I admit that. If I'm the Bears, now they played him, I guess, the other day in practice. He was at right tackle. But if I'm the Bears, I put him at left guard.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, it's the side he's comfortable with. He's got help on the outside. And then, see what happens. It's not like you got to play him right away. You don't.
Right.
Bring him along. Now, the only thing I thought was negative, and I thought he was going to pass through waivers, and it turned out the Bears were the only team that put the claim in on him. And obviously, they like the talent. The talent's there. He wouldn't have gone in the first round if the talent wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
But because he was I think the 17th pick or something, he's got a totally guaranteed contract. So the Bears, when you claim somebody on waivers, you're actually claiming the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And so they picked up that contract, and they weren't responsible for the signing bonus. That's on the Raiders. But there's $5.9 million left on that contract. This is only a second year, right. So that's this year, next year, and the year after. And if he fails, now it's on the Bears. Where if you would have let him pass through waivers, you would have signed him at a rookie minimum, and that whole thing would have been on the Raiders. So, but you got, it's a gamble. You're looking at the situation to say, hey, this is a guy that might be able to help us. We want him, and the guarantee isn't going to be that bad. So, but there's $5.9 million left on the contract over the course of the next 3 years. None of the signing bonus that got accelerated to the Raiders, and the Raiders got hit with that the day they waived him. So it's strictly the salary that they're responsible for, and then they also have the option of picking up that 5th-year option on him.
Mm-hmm.
I've tweeted a couple times. I said, it wouldn't shock me that if they could. They got to basically break this guy down and build him back up again.
Right.
And Ryan pretty much said the same thing. in the presser on Wednesday, I think it was. And if they're successful doing it, wouldn't shock me to see him at left guard next year.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's for the future.
Right.
I'm not expecting much out of this year unless, injuries take place.
Right. Yeah. So I agree with you, Greg, given, that he had he put together a really bad rookie year on tape. I mean, if you look at the tape of him with the Raiders last season, it's pretty scary.
You look at the tape of him from preseason this year and it's scary.
Yeah. Wow.
I put on one game and I think he gave up 2 or 3 pressures
Mm-hmm.
at right tackle. Now his run blocking, there's nothing wrong with his run blocking. It's pass protection.
Right. So he, like N'Keal Harry, who also put together some really atrocious tape his time with the Patriots. Those are really good gambles for guys that you can, as you said so perfectly, build them back up, give them the confidence, coach them. Hopefully we can have some patience with those guys. And who knows, maybe at late the second half of the season, they can be good contributors, or in the case of Leatherwood, next season it could be his breakout season. So hopefully everything works out with Alex Leatherwood and N'Keal Harry, who I kind of put in that same boat of guys who come with some problems, but and we're costly. I mean, in Harry's case, it was a 7th round draft pick, not a huge expense, of course, but you will always like to keep those draft picks if possible. All right. I want to talk about Lucas Patrick next because he is back. He still has a cast on that thumb, and it's the hand that he snaps the ball with. He today or tomorrow's
does he have a cast on his hand? I haven't seen that. I know he's got something. Yeah, I don't know if it's a cast.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm not sure it's a cast either. Maybe someone in the chat can help.
You know what they do especially for athletes, you get an injury, you get a broken digit or whatever. They go in and they do surgery and then they plate it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that hurries up the healing time, so to speak. So for a normal human being and I broke my thumb and I broke my thumb in a football game and I played the next week. And I broke my thumb. Where's my thumb? Here it is. I broke it down in here.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a cast on. I still played, but I was running back. I had to carry the ball with my left hand instead of my right hand.
Mm-hmm.
But I had that cast on for a good 6 weeks. Now, with what they're doing now, and that was a long time ago. That was in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So, what they're doing now with these plates, that'll help with the calcification, help with the healing, get them back on the field faster. If it was his left hand, there'd be absolutely no problem at all. But if he proves in practice this week that he can snap and get his hand out and punch, he'll probably be playing. If not, he'll be inactive this week, and Sam Mustipher will be the center. But, some people say, and I think Getsy said this strictly to throw it out there for the 49ers,
mm-hmm.
not for us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, because somebody said, well, could he play guard? Oh, well, yeah, we're checking everything out. That's coach speak.
Yeah.
He hasn't practiced one day at guard since he's been with this team, going back to the OTs. He's been strictly a center. He was a center all last year.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had people working at the guard position all training camp, and you're just starting to get some cohesiveness. And so you're going to put him in there and screw it all up? That isn't happening.
Wow. By the way, I have to say this. Luis Perez is checking in from Arecibo, a beautiful town in Puerto Rico. Anybody ever get to Puerto Rico for vacation, make sure you visit Arecibo. It is gorgeous, and as is most of the rest of the island. Regarding Sam Mustipher at center, he has shown me progress in the preseason. Where is your evaluation of him? And if Patrick has to sit out another week or two, or is moved over to right guard over Tevin Jenkins, where's your confidence level that Sam Mustipher can play better than he did last season?
Oh, I think it's an entirely different player. They still, if you look on the website, they still got him listed at 332, but I saw on the flip card he was 311. I think the 311 is right.
Yeah.
He was too heavy last year, and that wasn't his fault. That's what Juan Castillo, the former offensive line coach, wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he played pretty damn good in the preseason.
Mm-hmm.
And you listen to the other linemen talk about him, and I know the fans have been shooting him full of holes, but maybe fairly, but at the same time, the guy next to him, Daniels, who's now a Pittsburgh Steeler, got eaten up in the preseason in Pittsburgh, and last I looked, he's not even starting. So and they paid him some pretty good money, to sign him. So was it all Mustipher's fault last year? And some of these things we just don't have the answers to. And, there's a lot of things that, you find out after the fact. And the biggest one to me is I'm really interested in seeing how Mitch Trubisky plays for Pittsburgh. Did they get rid of him and they didn't need to?
Yeah.
And I know your buddy Mike North. He's listening, going, "Yep."
Absolutely. He's gonna break his neck nodding up and down on that one.
The way he was brought around, and you see how some people were misused, and it has nothing to do with Justin Fields, but did they waste picks because they didn't properly develop a first-round quarterback that just now should be really coming into his own?
That is the $64 million question. I've upped it up from 64,000 to 64 million.
Well, probably with inflation, you're equal.
Exactly. So it is going to be fascinating. The other thing that I'm fascinated about with the Steelers, to stay on that subject just for a moment, is our previous right guard, the kid from Iowa, who I'm forgetting.
Dan, that's what I said. Daniels, he's not even listed as a starter, I don't think.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing, because
he had a tough preseason for them.
Yes, he did.
So I'd have to go back and look at the depth chart, but I know going into the last preseason game, he was not starting going into that game. He had lost his job, and he had played really poorly for them. They were disappointed. And like I said, they gave him a lot of money. They gave him over, the full length of the contract, well over $20 million. It's like nine and a half a year.
Yeah. If Tevin Jenkins does not start on Sunday,
first of all, Aldo, I'm going to say this. I'm going to be shocked if he doesn't start.
Yeah.
Go back to what I said a couple minutes ago.
Yeah.
Daniels has not practiced 1 second at guard, or not Daniels. Patrick has not practiced 1 second at guard with this team. It's really been a few years since he's played guard. He was a center last year. And I just, it doesn't make any sense to me. That's like going back a few weeks to the rumors that Tevin Jenkins was going to get traded, yet he's working with the number ones. And then Ryan Poles cleared that up in the press conference during the week. He said, I wasn't making any calls. Now, he can't stop other people from calling.
Right.
But I think where those rumors came are other people giving those to people like the Rap Sheet and Adam Scheffler.
Yeah, I think that Tevin is becoming more and more mentally tough with all that he has had to put up with. But if he does not start at right guard, which is unlikely, I agree with you. But if he does not start, I hope he still keeps his head together and we don't go through any player moping kind of thing. he doesn't, he just concerns me in terms of his mental makeup and having another setback. I would love to see him plug and play him at right guard and see what you got there.
Well, I'm going to say, from my standpoint, watching him the last 2 games, he's earned that job.
Yeah.
There's no question. So you put him out and play. If you're going to put somebody, if somebody says, well, we want to start Patrick, okay, put him at left guard. He's played left guard, but I think right now the weak link on the line, some people might say Braxton Jones because he's a rookie, and yeah, you can say that, but the guy with the least upside now, because he's well into his career, would probably be Cody Whitehair. And it's not that he plays poorly; he doesn't, but he is what he is. We've seen the best of Cody Whitehair, and he's not going to get any better than what we've seen. Not that what we've seen is bad.
Exactly.
That just saying that, he's reached the ceiling.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to talk about these wide receivers. Byron Pringle is back at practice. I'm concerned a little bit about the fact that there are only three wide receivers who have had substantial practice time this offseason with Justin Fields. Of course, Darnell Mooney, their connection and their relationship is super strong. And there's St. Brown and Pettis. Everybody else on that wide receiver core has had limited practice time with Justin Fields. That's
I'll disagree with you a little bit.
Okay.
They had the entire offseason program.
Yeah.
And for all intents and purposes, that's more passing camp than anything else because you can't have any hitting.
Good point.
So you had too many camps, 9 OTAs. So that's 15 total practices in the off-season program. And on top of, what they did in training camp, from the playbook point of view, I'm not worried at all. Generally speaking, when you're injured and you're not practicing, you are still doing conditioning, whether it's on the field or inside the training room. In the case of Pringle, where he had a quad injury, he was probably riding a bike or doing stuff in the pool, to keep up their cardiovascular. You still got to. They practiced Monday. They're off today. They got a full week of practice this week. Somebody is not going to be active, whether it's the new guy, Smith Marset, or it's Pringle. That remains to be seen. There'll probably be 5. They got 6 on the club, and there's 6 on the club, right?
Yeah. Was it 6? I got the number here. Wide receivers, where are you? 6 indeed.
Okay. I think on a normal week, if everybody's healthy, all 6 are going to be active. But okay, this week might be 5. But and here's one thing that people said. Well, this other guy, how's he going to be up to speed in a week? He's going to be up to speed. He's probably pretty close to being up to speed now because he played in a very similar offense with very similar terminology. So it's not going to take it. It's not like he came from an entirely different system. O'Connell's system is the Ram system. The Ram system is San Francisco system, which is Green Bay's system, which is now with Minnesota system. They're all fairly the same thing as far as terminology. Now you can have some routes being done a different way, but that part's the easy part once you get the terminology done.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. What can you tell us? I know you spoke a little bit on this new wide receiver acquired from Minnesota. I remember how he torched the Chicago Bears in week 18 last season, that final regular season game. I think he had 4 receptions for over 100 yards and a touchdown. Outside of that, I don't know much about him. What else can you share about him?
Well, I think he caught less than 10 passes all last year.
Mm-hmm.
He was down on the depth chart as a rookie, but then you go back, he was Iowa's number one receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And he also returned kickoffs, and he was a dynamic kickoff returner. He timed only 4.5 at the combine. I guarantee he's a lot faster than that. And, people say, well, he's 4.5, so that's what he is. Well, I always go back, and I ran track when I was in high school in the first part of college. And how many sprinters do you see seem to run the same speed every race?
Yeah, good point. Yes. Great.
Some days are good days, some days are bad days. They can, in say a situation like the World Championships where they run like 4 races in the course of 3 days, working their way through the preliminaries and the quarters and the semis and all that. I mean, they run 4 races. There's 4 separate times there. And the difference between the best and the worst could be more than 0.2 of a second. Okay, so who's to say? I look at play speed, and play speed says 4.45 every day of the week.
Mm-hmm. That and now there are metrics where they measure a guy when he's running with the football, and that seems to be much more important than the combine 40 results, in my opinion.
Well, they have these chips that the players are wearing. They can measure their speed in miles per hour on the field, how fast they're going at their fastest speed. And that's a very valid point. In fact, to tell you the truth, I think the 40 is going to be obsolete in another 5 years.
Well, interesting. They have been talking about making some changes with the combine. It would make sense to me. I hate to see offensive linemen run 40 yards. It's like they never have to do that. Rarely, I should say. J2K has a question regarding the wide receivers. He says, well, what's your confidence level that Velus Jones will be a larger part of this offense? He's not so sure that he's ready. Sure, he'll get some plays, but he hasn't shown anything in the preseason outside of running back kicks.
Well, I go back to what Darnell Mooney said just yesterday. I can't wait to play football on Sunday. We've only used 4 plays all preseason.
Ooh, interesting.
So, yeah. and that's probably in the passing game. It's they've been practicing every day. The coaches see that. It's being filmed, and I say this every single show. So it's not what he necessarily did in the preseason. It's what he's done in practice. Now, is he going to still be, have like a full playbook early on? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is, and then go back to when Cohen was here and Cohen was a young player, it's how many touches a game do you want him to have? And it includes returns. So it could be, depends if he ends up being the number 1 kickoff and punt returner.
Mm-hmm.
It's returns, it's reverses, and it's receptions. Mm-hmm. So you could say, I want him to touch the ball 10 times in the game early on, and he will make an impact with that 10 touches. And it can be distributed in any of 4 different ways, as we just talked about. So that's what you're looking at, is the number of touches. Yeah, he could play 18 plays and have 10 touches.
Mm-hmm. Which would be,
and he's still not a huge part of the offense as far as number of plays, but he can make a big impact because of his speed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to see him get 10 touches a game, and those bubble screens are something that he could get 40 yards after the catch with that amazing speed. So I agree with some of the people in the chat room who have said that Velus has almost been hidden. You don't want to display what he can do, and as you said, and we've all been learning more and more that it's practice that these coaches value more than the preseason games, the production and practice, and they forecast what players can do and match them up against different schemes and different defenders. Should be an interesting chess match on Sunday for these players. Would like to talk about the running back room. Everyone is super high on David Montgomery. He should have an incredible season. Khalil Herbert is his backup. Who is the third guy on this?
Treston Ebner.
Wow, what amazing that he beat out Darrington Evans, who I thought was a key pickup during the offseason. You think Evans will see much playing time?
Yeah, and he could be the number one kickoff return guy. It wouldn't shock me. And it's not taking anything away from Velus. It's that he's pretty good at that thing himself. You know, he's had a few returns in college for touchdowns. He's a very good open field runner. I'll tell you what surprised me about him in preseason was when you look at tape at Texas Tech, you know, I thought he was average. You get him in space, he was great. And he catches the ball really well. You can put him out in the slot. He runs good routes. Very good kick return guy. Guy can run like a deer. But his inside running was a lot better in the preseason than I'd given him credit for. You know, he gets under his pads and he is able to break some tackles and make some yardage after contact. So he's got some toughness to him.
One of the interesting aspects of this roster is that Jake Tongs, the rookie undrafted player, and who he's a surprise that he made the team. And they have another fullback on the roster, and that is Kerry Blasingame, who comes with a great pedigree. These guys will probably be used more as U-backs. Tell us about that. I'm guessing when I say U-back.
Well, I'm going to guess that one's going to be inactive.
Okay.
During a game. Now, you brought in the new guy they got off of waivers from the Jets. He could be the guy who's inactive this week, even as strong as a blocker as he is. But it depends how quickly he can pick up the offense. Tongas is an interesting guy. I mean, number one, he's never played fullback before. He was a tight end at Cal. And you go back and you look at the Cal tape, he's pretty good tight end. He runs well, he catches well, he got a large receiving radius. But he showed that, you know, he's got the flexibility to get low and get underneath people as a lead blocker and the toughness to be the lead blocker on some of that ISO stuff as the fullback. So to me, he's when they announced the initial squad, said 2 tight ends and 2 fullbacks. No, Tongas was your third tight end. He's a combo player.
Right.
Okay. So, and he's smart enough to, Cal, I guess, pretty good school, got a good reputation.
Yes.
So, you know, he got through there. He's smart enough to be able to learn the fullback position and that F back in this offense there. I think they're referred to as the F, position. So I think that, he's a valuable addition. Now, whether he's going to be active this week or the other guy's going to be active, we'll find that out on Sunday.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the defense now. Nomad had a question. He's Armand Watts. He screams 3-tech to him. Just wondering what you think about Watts seeing some action at the 3-tech.
I think you can play either, but actually he was last year's defense in Minnesota is similar to the Bears defense this year. Not the exact same thing, but similar. And he was the nose. And they're really – the nose is an improper term because they're really a one technique. Seldom do they line head up on the nose. And he was playing nose again. They switched to a 3-4, and he was playing both the nose and as a 5 technique in their new scheme now. And he's not – I don't see him. He's big enough to be a 2-gapper in that type of scheme, and he's tough enough. But you go back and you look at last year's tape for Minnesota, he started only 9 games, and he got that because of injury as a backup. Hell, he had like 4.5 or 5 sacks in 9 games. He's a pretty darn good interior pass rusher. But I think, and Flus was asked this, where you're going to play him. He said both positions. I think he is capable of playing both the 1 and the 3.
Okay.
And give you, good effort and good play at both positions. And I think Blackson is the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk from fans in Minnesota who were just shocked that Watts was released. He had
they made a trade with Houston,
right
to get a guy, and then they cut him, another defensive lineman, and then they cut Watts to make room for this guy.
Okay.
And also let's stay on that Minnesota stuff. Minnesota gives up a draft choice to bring in Rieger, who has been a bust in Philadelphia, former first-round pick, and then they cut Smith-Marsette. I tell you right now, Smith-Marsette's a better player than Rieger. So the Bears came out ahead on that.
Wow, that's encouraging. Glad to hear that. Yeah, I had my eye on Rieger, but if you're saying we came out ahead on that, I'm buying.
Rieger, there's no question he can run, but he's not a good football player.
Right. Interesting. What else on the defensive line is catching your eye with this roster of players? I'm intrigued by these outside pass rushers having Mohammed and Quinn starting game one. Should provide a fantastic pass rush on this rookie quarterback. I mean, let's just say it. Trey Lance is a rookie, and his lack of playing time over the last 3 years now makes
he's the same class as Justin Fields,
right? But he played how many snaps last season? So that's why I sort of consider him officially a rookie,
right?
And he didn't play his last year.
One game is last year at North Dakota State.
So these pass rushers and the scheme that Eberflus and Williams will come up with should disrupt Lance considerably. This could be a really low-scoring game Sunday, huh?
I'm going to say it right now. Bears are going to win this game.
Ooh, I like that.
I've thought that for weeks. I don't think Lance is ready. Trey Lance may be a great quarterback, but I'm going back, and I think we've talked about this in the past. I called up Daniel Jeremiah last year, probably in March. It was after the combine. And I go, what's the big deal with Lance? I mean, I couldn't see it on tape, and I said, and he says, it's what everybody thinks he can be.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, that's fine. You don't take that guy in the first round. I said, I just don't get it. And that's my old school.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, so I'm repeating it, but I'm brought up by Parcells, and that old school thinking was you wanted a quarterback to have 800 or 900 throwing reps, attempts during the course of his career to be ready to play in the National Football League. Well, hell, this guy had 300. And then only played one game his final year, which would have been his junior year at North Dakota State. And it's like, and he's ready. It's not like he's jumping one level. He's jumping 3 levels.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with Free Palestine that every year the quarterbacks get overvalued. That's the trend in drafting over the last 10 years or so. Guys who, years ago would have been 3rd round draft picks are now being chosen in the late 1st round. It's incredible.
Hell, this guy was a 3rd pick in the draft. And San Francisco gave up the farm to get him.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And it may turn out to be a good pick. I just don't think he's ready. The guy who got screwed over on that end is Garoppolo. And I tell you, my take on this Garoppolo thing, they're trying to make it sound like, well, they couldn't find the right fit for a trade and everything. Bullshit. I think they saw that Lance isn't ready, and they are really trying to swim upriver if he does falter the way he probably will. and they got to have somebody be able to come in and play.
Mm-hmm. Jimmy says that Davis Mills is a better quarterback than Lance right now, and I have to agree with that. The 3rd round draft pick, Davis Mills of the Texans, he's been very impressive with what he's done in his short time.
Well, he was a starter for a good part of his rookie year. Comes from Stanford. That Stanford system is a very pro-friendly system, and Pep Hamilton, who was the offensive coordinator, worked in that Stanford system for a long time. He was Andrew Luck's coach at Stanford, and then he was the offensive coordinator for Andrew Luck for his first few years in the league, at the Colts, and so they've got this guy in Houston doing a lot of the same things he was doing in college. Now, Pep has changed that offense to a degree. It's not the exact same thing he did in Indianapolis and then what was done at Stanford, but still there's familiarity there. And he's a smart kid. Do they have all the parts around him? That remains to be seen. But I'll tell you, I think, just from the little I've seen and what I've read, I think Lovey so far is doing a decent job down there.
I agree with my man here, Renewable, says, I keep saying Fluce's D, but shouldn't I be saying it's Williams' D and Getsy's offense? I agree. Fluce is playing that CEO role, and every time Williams has been asked about what influence Eberflus has on the defense, and basically the response has been, he's giving me full reign. We bounce ideas off of each other, but this is Alan Williams' defense, and I'm really, really happy about that, because I think more and more head coaches in the National Football League should play that CEO role and oversee the 3 coordinators, the special teams, defense, and offense. What's your opinion on that, Greg?
Well, first of all, I disagree with you a little bit, only because it's still Fluce's D. Yes, Williams is running the D.
Right.
I guarantee you Fluce is helping with the game plan. He's sitting in on both sides, on the meetings. And so it's another set of eyes. And so he's going to help with the game plan. Is he calling the defenses? No. But it's still his defense. It's what he put together. Where did Williams learn the defense?
Well, from Fluce. Yeah.
Okay. So in that aspect, it's Fluce's defense.
And what do you think about Fluce being that CEO coach and that trend? I want to say, I don't know if it's a trend, but the whole aspect of having your head coach being equally committed to all 3 phases of the game of football, and not like a Matt Nagy who was probably 75% focused on the offense.
Let's go like 95.
I said 75. I said to myself, that's a bad one.
I think part of it is, especially this year, is because he's been his entire NFL career a defensive coach, is that he wants to get into the heads of the offense so he can really learn more. And then he said an interesting thing, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. He said, you're looking at tape at how to attack the defense, and he's a defensive specialist, so he can say, and he knows defense. If I'm attacking this, I know this is what the weaknesses of this defense is. He can tell you that better than the offensive coaches probably can tell themselves. So from that aspect, that helps. And that he's helping on both sides. You just hope he doesn't try to do too much. There's some coaches that don't let their coaches coach, and they overcoach. From what we've seen so far, I think he's letting his guys, do the coaching. He has his input, as he should. He's the head coach. But he pretty much lets them do what they want. But there's always discussion, and don't think there isn't. Everything is thoroughly talked out.
Yeah. All right. I want to move on and talk about the linebackers who are now on the 53-man roster. Of course, Roquan Smith I anticipate he's going to have a all-pro type of season. Whether he makes the all-pro or not, of course, we won't know. But till then,
he was second team all-pro last year, but didn't make the Pro Bowl.
Tell me why. Tell me how that happens. That's ridiculous. Matthew Adams, Nicholas Morrow, Jack Sanborn. Congratulations, Jack. Roquan, as I mentioned, and then the new guy, Sterling Weatherford, the 5 linebackers on the website that contains the roster. What are your thoughts about this linebacker crew?
Well, I didn't like losing my man Caleb.
Yeah,
the guy just makes plays.
Yeah, I don't understand why that happened.
Well, somebody had to go, but this Weatherford,
mm-hmm.
the boy can play.
Excellent.
And there's no question about it. Very, very instinctive. Now, this guy is taking the route of, and I'm not putting him in the same category,
mm-hmm.
but the Brian Urlacher route, in that he was a safety, and a lot of times a box safety for Miami of Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And a good-sized kid. He played, 215 to 220 last year at Miami. He's about 2.25 right now. He was 224 at his pro day, runs a 4.60. Really explosive jumps, his change of direction. I think he ran a sub 7 or a 7 flat 3 cone, which for a big guy is really, really good. So, he's still got that DB athleticism with that linebacker toughness. But you go back and you look at the Colts preseason tape, and he was playing Will and Mike for the Colts
mm-hmm.
During the preseason, and it didn't look like he was brand new to the position.
Mm-hmm.
He was like really instinctive. Ballard was pissed when they lost him. And he's probably pissed that he put him up, tried to sneak him through waivers, and you got to, and that happens. Everybody's watching the other guys' films because there's guys you like,
mm-hmm.
And you want to see how they do. So, and he publicly said, we made a mistake cutting him. And it really upsets me that we lost him.
Wow. All right. Before we talked DBs, a question came up regarding the surprises, and we've talked about this before. The 49ers have really no tape at all to help with their coaching and what they can anticipate to see from the offense and the defense. I mean, they have not seen Roquan Smith play under this new defense. How big of an advantage is that for the Bears?
Well, what they will do, what San Francisco will do, is they're going to go back and in order to game plan against the Bears for their offensive game plan, they are going to watch Indianapolis tape from last year and go off of those tendencies, because pretty much the whole defensive staff came from Indy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they're going to use. But Al Williams is going to put his own touch onto this defense.
Mm-hmm.
So is he going to call things? Are the tendencies that Flus had in certain down and distance situations going to be the same that Williams has when he calls the defense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's advantage Bears right there, because San Francisco's guessing. It's really the same for the Bears offense. Mm-hmm. So they say, okay, Getsy came from Green Bay, so it's going to be similar to what Green Bay does, but he's got a more athletic quarterback, albeit not the great future Hall of Famer, because we just don't know, what Fields is going to be. So is Getsy going to call plays like LaFleur called plays?
Mm-hmm.
Well, who the hell knows? We don't even know that. And he didn't do anything in the preseason. Like Moody said, yeah, we used 4 pass plays all preseason, just about, so it's that part's always an advantage when you got a new coaching staff, because you have no history.
Yeah.
And it's going to take, next week you play Green Bay. Now, obviously LaFleur knows Getsy, but does he know him as far as how as he thinks when it comes to putting a game plan together? And because Getsy, as the quarterback coach in Green Bay, was part of the system, but not the decision maker within that system. Because LaFleur, even though he didn't have the title offensive coordinator, he's the offensive coordinator.
Right.
Same like Nagy here. So it's just going to be interesting. It's going to take teams, I'm going to say 3 games to really get a feel of how these guys call games.
Yeah.
And what to expect. And then you get into tendencies. When you get into the last half of the season, then they're going to have a lot of those tendencies down.
All right, I want to turn our attention to the defensive backs who are on the squad. And the one player I really would love for you to comment on is cornerback Lamar Jackson. I think this guy could be a huge surprise. And I know we've gotten a lot of questions in the chat room about what your confidence level is in Kindle Vildor. Seems to me like those guys might be battling for playing time. Your thoughts on that cornerback position and Lamar Jackson overall?
I didn't know much about Jackson before this year. He played for the Jets. Earned the starting role, had played up and down, but the Jets were up and down. I mean, so can you put everything on Lamar Jackson? And now we go back to Vildor. Vildor was a villain within the defense last year.
Yes.
And I stood up for the guy. I know what I saw in college tape. So I know what he did in college. And I like Vildor. And I think from everything I've heard, the coaches like Vildor. Now, what I don't know, who the hell is going to be the starter? Now, San Francisco, being that offense they are, they're probably going to be playing 3 wides 85% of the time. And if that's the case, it's, I think the rookie is going to be inside playing the slot, and either Vildor or Jackson is going to be the starter on the outside.
Interesting. So you think that it's likely that Gordon will be moved into that slot nickel position game one?
That's what it seems to be. And that's a very important position. Even though you're, quote, the third corner, you're a starter. You're paying 85% of the snaps, maybe 90% of the snaps. You look at a team like Buffalo. Buffalo never played with 3 linebackers all last year. I mean, it might have been like 98%, 2 linebackers. And the Bears, that's what the league's going to. So it's your will and your mic. And Sam is like a dinosaur in your 4-3 front. So it's because of what the offenses are doing, you got to play with 3 corners and often play with 6 defensive backs. And that 6th defensive back is more of a safety type that can play that linebacker role because he's replacing one of the linebackers.
If is Tavon Young eligible for return, Greg? I don't recall what happened there, whether he was dropped, he was put on IR, what his situation is.
I think he's done.
Okay. So that didn't work out, unfortunately, because that guy can play and he can play a nickel, but
but he's had, in fairness, although he's the last 3 years he's had injury problems. And I think, now Thomas Graham can come back. He's on the practice squad.
Yes.
That whole thing with Thomas Graham is interesting because he had a hamstring problem, and hamstrings, if you've got a bad hammy, that can take a long time. And obviously this has taken a long time because it's been like all preseason. Now, theoretically, they could have put him on IR before and ended the season or whatever. Or they could have, they waived him regular
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think from a standpoint of, and I'm throwing a dart at the wall here.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee it. But if he was technically still not ready to go, he would have had to been waived injured, and then he would have reverted to injured reserve if nobody claimed him, and then he would have been out for the season. This way, they just waived him regular.
Mm-hmm.
He's got no tape from the preseason. He was a late round pick the year before. He really only had 1 to 2 games last year. So the chances of anybody claiming him were slim.
Mm.
And that's what they did. There was a gamble. But is he still 100%? Probably not. But he's going to get a chance to get up to speed and get ready to play while he's on the practice squad. And when he's on the practice squad, he's getting a lot of practice time because you're being the scout team.
Mm-hmm. Matthew says that. Excuse me. Let me go to who was it? J-Rock said that Tavon is listed on IR on the Bears website, but that only but he was placed on IR before cutdowns.
Right.
So that makes him ineligible. Yeah, ineligible to return. Exactly. Unlike somebody who was placed on IR after the cutdowns. Like,
yeah, let me switch over here. I'll still be on here, but I can look at the. I think on IR that can come back is N'Keal Harry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Ty J. Sharp was put down before. Tavon Young was put down before.
Yeah, too bad about Sharp. I had high expectations for him, especially after the good outing he had in that second preseason game.
Yep.
Then Matthew asked the question, do you expect Jalen Johnson to be following around the number 1 wide receiver like he did for a number of games last season? That seemed to be a good strategy based on what you know about this defense. Is that something that they did before in Indianapolis, where they would put their top corner tracking the number 1 wide receiver from the other team?
I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if they're going to be putting Jalen on number 1 or it's going to be strictly left and right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure they know what they're going to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
it's going to be
it's just going to we're going to have to play that one out. I think if they got confidence in both corners, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. One of the things that I'm most intrigued about this first game is there's so many unanswered questions. And so we're going to look at things like that. How is the defense going to behave with against starting wide receivers? So many different storylines. It's going to make for a very, very intriguing game and one that I'm going to love evaluating with you a week from today.
No, not. It's going to be a week from tomorrow.
A week from tomorrow.
Oh, wait a minute. Today is Tuesday. I keep thinking today's Monday. A week from today.
You want to tell people why you're?
I got to have another little surgery on Monday.
Yeah.
And I'll be out Monday night, Monday afternoon, something like that.
Everybody wish Greg well, but I can tell you, because he's shared with me, it's not a big deal, but it's something that has to be done so that it doesn't become a big deal. So, all right, some more questions here. Let's see. What do you think about this Bears defense? Are they going to blitz more than perhaps Indianapolis did last season? It seems to me like every NFL team now loves to get that pass rush, the 4-man pass rush, to generate action and avoid having to blitz. But do you figure, like, for instance, game 1 against Trey Lance, given his inexperience at football, do you have a gut feel that perhaps they're going to blitz a lot more?
I don't know. They did blitz a little bit in the preseason, but not very much. And again, San Francisco's going to go back to see what the tendencies were from Indianapolis a year ago. Now, in saying that, their big linebacker in Indianapolis had like 5 sacks last year from blitzes. Now, you can blitz them 5 times and get 5 sacks, and that means you didn't blitz very much. I don't know the exact frequency he has. They're going to blitz some, but I think it's can you do some overload things or whatever? Yeah. How exactly they're going to do it, I don't know. And the main reason being is we didn't see anything except pretty basic football in the preseason. There was one play we talked about, I think, last week in the second preseason game. Jones was playing the 3 technique, and they dropped him into coverage on one play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they did it for one reason and one reason only. Be aware, we can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And now you got to prepare for it, from the offensive side.
Yeah. Michael Halatak, about an hour ago, posted this question. Aside from the obvious, Justin Fields, Mooney, Monty, and Kmet, who do you think are a couple of guys or maybe one guy on this offense that could be really big and steady contributors to this Bears offense?
I think EQ and Pringle.
Yep.
And I think Bayless too, but I think one out of EQ and Pringle is going to have a pretty good year.
Mm-hmm.
And I lean only because Pringle's been hurt the entire preseason. I kind of lean towards EQ, but I'm just going to say right now, I think this receiver core is a lot better than the national media gives it credit for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I got to tell you, based on the practices that I saw, I am just so hopeful that Equanimeous St. Brown can continue that progress that he has shown. I mean, he knows this offense, and Justin Fields has said it. His precision route running is just fantastic, and Justin has already a lot of confidence in Equanimeous St. Brown. He did have a little trouble holding on to the football after a couple of hard hits, so that's something to keep an eye on. But, Greg has been a champion of the Equanimeous St. Brown signing, and it bared out in those practices. And so hopefully in game 1, we'll see him. I'm
going to go back, and I've said it a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
He's got more raw talent than his younger brother who plays for Detroit.
Right.
He's bigger, faster, stronger, more explosive all across the board. His brother had 90 receptions last year as a rookie, only averaged about 10 yards a catch. So he was a short range receiver.
Mm-hmm.
But, you got bragging rights within the family going on here.
Yep.
and so, how many people think about that? I don't know. I do. Little stuff like that, I'm always thinking about. Okay, my little brother really put up some big numbers. I got to do a lot more this year just to catch up, and then I got to surpass him. So you know how competitiveness people are, and that family is extremely competitive. That's verified. Mm-hmm. So I think, being that they're both in the same division, that it could be kind of interesting what happens with him.
Mm-hmm. And Cornelius is spot on. EQ is a fantastic downfield blocker, and that's going to really help this whoever is the ball carrier is, whether it's a running back or somebody catching a pass. It's going to be outstanding to see him block downfield. Another question.
I got a question. How come nobody's pissing and moaning about Kmet anymore?
I'm with you on that one. My good friend Dan Aguirre, we do a show on Tuesday nights in the bar room. He has been so upset and complaining so much about Cole Kmet, and I think this year Cole Kmet is going to shut him up. He's already shut him up as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, anyone out there who have a beef with Cole Kmet, list it in the chat room so that we can fire away at you. I love that. Great question from Danger T. What is the one position you think that the Bears need to address that you wish they could fill? I know you've talked a lot about that 3 tech, and there was another question about where is this is from Fochese. Says, are you worried about the 3 tech, or they better draft one next year? But back to Danger T's 3 tech or whatever position, what concerns you the most?
Probably defensive tackle. and some of that in the third preseason game.
Mm-hmm.
I felt a little better. Jones didn't play a lot, but he did what a 3-tech in this defense is supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He got penetration. He was disruptive. He made some plays. Who knows what Watt's going to do within this scheme? So I think the defensive tackle play as a whole is the biggest unknown, but the defense as a whole in the preseason played really, really well. There's two things that really impressed me in the preseason. One is the defense, how they played, and two is how disciplined this team was. I think they had 13 penalties or something for the whole preseason. And most teams have 13 penalties in one game in a preseason.
That's right.
And I may be off by one or two, but I mean, so what?
Yeah.
Very rare. And in the last preseason game, or even the second life, the starters, the main group, first half, one penalty.
Yeah, it's amazing when you get all these different players from different organizations and how quickly they've instilled that discipline to them is remarkable. Let's hope it carries on into the regular season. All right, next question. This is a really interesting question from Victor De Jesus. What is the Sam linebacker job description in this Bears defense?
Water boy.
Stay ready for in case something gets hurt.
The Sam played in the preseason. Now it ends.
Not going to get a lot of time.
I was watching it. There was actually the Sam. I'm going to say the Sam was in there, and I don't have the exact percentage, but I'm going to say 50% of the downs in the preseason. And now you go back to Indy, and Indy was like 85% two linebackers last year.
Yeah.
And
that's amazing.
And Flus has said that the Sam has got to be able to play the other two positions.
Yeah, it seems like linebackers in college football, if they're playing that Sam position, they may want to talk to their defensive coordinator and say, "Get me out of here, man. There's no future in the NFL for the Sam linebacker. They can't make tens of millions of dollars if you're not on the field." Great question from Chris Watts, because I was afraid I was going to forget your thoughts about the retirement of Ted Phillips, a guy who has gotten a lot of heat over the years from Chicago Bears fans. I know you know Ted very well. You guys have a good relationship. What are your thoughts about Ted?
It'll be out a little later today. I wrote about it for the Windy City Gridiron.
Awesome.
It's kind of hard for me to write because there's things I didn't want to say, things I wanted to say. Number one, I like Ted. And number two, the perception, and this should be number one, the perception of Ted Phillips that the media and the fans have is 100% wrong. Ted's job is not, now, yeah, you can put some of the hires on him, but his job is not the football team. His job is to run a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Okay, so it was, 1999, he takes over for Michael McCaskey as president of the team. And the first thing on his plate is to get Soldier Field redone. And that alone was a tough job. I mean, you've lived here all your life. You know what Chicago politics are like.
Oh, yeah.
And what Ted wanted to do and what they ended up doing were two different things. I read a thing the other day, and we came in 2 years after that. So they were just waiting for the season to end to, start tearing down the interior part of Soldier Field, which literally started 3 hours after that playoff game.
I remember that, yeah.
And, but, dealing with the politicians, getting that stadium done, getting it done in a very timely manner, that was all Ted Phillips. And having to deal was Chicago politics, which is tough for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's not just that. When I came into the league full time, I came into the league in 81, but 84 full time. The number of hires, your front office, your marketing and salespeople were nil.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one person. And now that's an enormous part of your workforce, not just for the Chicago Bears, for every team in the National Football League.
Mm-hmm.
And this all goes back to, when Jerry Jones bought the Cowboys, he taught the rest of the league the value of marketing and sponsorships. They just let football sell itself before. And then he came in, hey, guys, there's a lot of money to be made out there. Let me show you how to do it. Now, Jerry Jones can be vilified and people can laugh at him, whatever. But if it's not for Jerry Jones, these teams aren't worth the billions and billions of dollars that they're worth right now.
I agree.
Okay, when Ted Phillips took over that team, I don't know the exact figure, but it was somewhere between $300 and $400 million max, the value of that team. Forbes just came out with the estimated value of the Chicago Bears today is $5.8 billion.
Wow.
Okay, so it's 23 years later. And that's probably undervalued because it's in Chicago. It's probably north of $6 billion. Now, when this new stadium gets built, by the way, are you going to that thing Thursday night?
I would love to go. Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody said they're holding at the same time the Bills and Rams are playing, but that's not why I'm going. I have a couple.
No, it's at 5 or 5:30. 5:30, I think the meeting is.
No, I think I do think that the doors open at 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but I do have a couple of shows to do that night, so I'll be working on that. But I'm going to be reading every newspaper article, everything that's said. Hopefully there's a transcript or a video version of it, because I'd love to see how they handle some of the concerns that the residents have about building it in Arlington Heights. And the biggest concern, of course, is taxes. What's it going to do to my taxes, my property taxes and stuff? So I'll be following that closely.
They're not going to tell you anything about stadium design and all that. It's going to be, here's what we want to do with the property.
Right.
I'm going to put the stadium here, and there's going to be a casino over here and a hotel and all. What the general plan is. So, and that's really all you need to know right now, not what it's going to actually look like. But to getting back to Ted, this whole thing in Arlington Heights is Ted Phillips.
Yeah.
Okay, he put that together. So the number, my office was right across the hall from Ted's. And from 8 until 5, he's in meetings every frickin' day, just about, with different people from different parts of the organization that he oversees. So to blame him on the football side, I get the part, well, he hired so-and-so. Okay, yeah, I agree. That part's on him. Did he make some mistakes? Sure. Did he hire Ryan Pace and Nagy? Well, I'll put it this way. Ryan Pace and John Fox. No, Ernie Accorsi did. Ernie Accorsi was brought in with the league's recommendation. And they had done this with other clubs too, where they have people like Ernie who are supposedly experts in the field now and can take people through the interview process, et cetera, and come up with good names for the hiring. It was Ernie who settled on Ryan Pace, and it was Ernie who basically told Ryan Pace he's hiring John Fox because Ryan Pace was going to be a rookie GM. Then as far when Fox didn't work out and they brought in Matt Nagy, that was more Ryan Pace. Ted was involved, George was involved, but it was still more Ryan on that. But as the overseer of the organization, yeah, it falls on Ted. But I'm just saying that the treatment or villainous type picture that people paint of Ted Phillips is totally wrong. His job is to increase the value of that franchise. And he has done that very, very successfully.
Yeah, you really want to win championships, but if you're the McCaskey Hallis family, the fact that you're now swimming in dough, and a lot of it is due to the hard work of Ted Phillips, you got to be pretty happy, and that's one reason they were.
Well, here's the question I asked people. I did it on Twitter last week. You can probably name most of the GMs and head coaches in the league, correct?
Yep.
Just your memory.
Yep.
How many team presidents can you name?
Yep. I
bet you can't come up with 5.
I saw you post that, and I actually went on the on teams' different websites to learn some of the names, and I've forgotten them all.
Yeah, I mean it's a very important job.
Yeah.
But in most cases, it's not in front of the media. It is here,
right?
Because they I keep using the word vilify because they want to vilify anybody they can point a gun at. They want to do it here,
right? Well, and the thing is, to answer your question, is that most of the people who are the team presidents are not football people.
Somebody said Ted came from the IRS. No, he did not come from the IRS.
That was a joke. But, they're not football people who usually have that job. It's like you have been saying, since the start of the year when the Bears were looking to replace Ryan Pace at the GM position, and people were crying for somebody for polls to report to have another football person there. You were saying, well, why is that necessary? You're just adding another level of football decision making. It's good to have somebody to bounce stuff off, but how many people do you need? Polls right now has Ian Cunningham. He himself brought Ian Cunningham out so that they can.
And Ian Cunningham is very capable of being a general manager himself.
Exactly,
and probably will be.
Yep.
In the near future. And if that in fact happens in the near future, the Bears will get 2 third-round picks.
Exactly.
So compensatory picks. So it's you got to have a businessman. I forgot the guy's name. The agent. That's the name everybody keeps throwing in. Trace Armstrong.
Former Bears player.
Trace Armstrong can't do that job. Trace Armstrong is another football guy. Yeah, he's an agent, but he's a football guy.
Right.
You think Trace Armstrong can build this complex out now in Arlington? No. Do you think he could have redid Soldier Field? No. Not his expertise. He's not a businessman.
Yeah.
And that's where you've got to separate the two.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. There needs to be somebody who is 100% focused on the economics of the team, the financial health of the team. If you're going to give that person responsibilities to talk football with the GM, then you're risking, maximizing the dollars you're going to earn. And from a business ownership perspective, that doesn't make a lot of sense. If you want Ryan Poles to have somebody to bounce stuff off of, he should have his assistant GM. You should, rely on the football people for that. But you need a money man, and even that money man needs a staff to run an operation like a multi-billion-dollar operation like the Chicago Bears. Any thoughts on who would be a successor? A lot of people are asking about Cliff Stein. That's the prominent name that's coming up. Of course, Trace Armstrong's name came up a little bit in the chat, but what are your thoughts of perhaps Cliff Stein, somebody you know well, of perhaps assuming that role?
Well, Dan Pompei is the guy who broke this story late last week, and Dan had 2 names, one of which is Cliff, and the other one was Scott Hagel. And Hagel's got a master's in business from Northwestern. He's a bright guy, but Scott's not a businessman. And his primary expertise is public relations, media relations, etc. They are hiring a search firm to look outside.
Right.
But Cliff has been here now 20 years. He came in January 2002. He came in like 6-7 months after we came in.
Mm-hmm.
We brought Cliff in, and he was an agent at the time, and he's an attorney, and he's a damn good attorney. And he is now the Bears general counsel.
Mm-hmm.
So in that role as being general counsel, he's involved with a lot of things, if not everything, from a legal point of view that Ted's involved with.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got a lot of experience in a lot of these areas
Mm-hmm.
because he's already been part of it. He's sat in those meetings. I would think that the odds-on favorite would be Cliff, but that final decision is going to be, they'll rely on the search firm to get them names, but the final decision, and Ted may play into that too. I don't know if he will or he won't. And Ted may stay on. You probably read, he said, we haven't talked about it yet, but if they ask me to stay on as a consultant for the stadium, where he has expertise doing that, they may, they may well do that. And I think they will, that Ted will be involved somehow as a consultant until this project is well off the ground. Maybe not until completion, but at least, close to it. And then I personally, because I know Cliff well, I think he'd be an excellent choice.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good guy to deal with. Very, very smart, very astute. But again, they could bring in somebody from outside. But if you bring in somebody from outside, then he's going to bring all his own people in there. And then you could have changes in different areas within the organization. And is that good? Like you saw with the Broncos, it's almost like bringing in new ownership. They in the last couple of weeks, they've changed a whole lot. Nothing having to do with football operations, but with business operations, they've changed a ton in that organization within the last couple of weeks.
Do you know Jim Phillips? This name is coming up. Victor De Jesus offered it up, and Matthew Focchisi says, yeah, I've heard that name too, Jim Phillips. I don't know a Jim Phillips.
Jim Phillips was I've met Jim Phillips a few times. He's a good guy. He was the AD at Northwestern.
Okay.
And now he is the commissioner of the ACC.
Okay.
So that's why there's local ties. He lived directly across the street from Mike Mulligan.
Okay.
And in just north of the Northwestern Stadium, about a 10-minute walk from the Northwestern Stadium. And so I think that's why his name is brought up, because of local ties. He was at Northwestern for a long time. Whether he turns out to be the guy, I don't know. Whether he's even interviewed. That's a name that, the media, how the media always puts out, and I'm not criticizing the media here. They always put, okay, who's a logical guy?
Right.
And the first two names outside of Stein were Trace Armstrong and Phillips.
Okay. I was listening to Hogan John's podcast, and they talked about how Ryan Poles is probably happy now because he is basically in control of all the football operations. So Ted Phillips out the door. He probably doesn't have to consult with Ted very much. He's got to be happy. But J-Rock asked an interesting question. Do you think that a new president will come in and maybe give Ryan Poles a short leash because he might want to have his own GM and coach? You're smiling already. Go ahead.
No, because you're forgetting one thing that happened when they hired Ryan.
Aha.
They changed the report. They changed the reporting structure.
Great point.
And the general manager now reports to George McCaskey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the head coach reports to George McCaskey.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's Ted is the guy who went to George and said, you know what? We haven't had the greatest record the last 2 years. Let's flip this a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have a little more success.
Which is, to me, the way to do it. Let's remove as many reporting structures as possible. Why have him report to Ted Phillips and then Ted reports to George McCaskey on it? So hopefully Ryan Poles is the right guy for the job, and all he is sharing with George McCaskey is all the good news. The stadium itself, as we talked a few minutes ago, there is going to be a public meeting on Thursday. The Bears management is going to try to assure Arlington Heights that this is a win-win deal for everyone. But there was a question, I think it was from Taurine, who said, is the NFL going to put up like hundreds of millions of dollars to help with the construction of this stadium? Do you know anything at all about that? Because it's of great interest to me, because I am a taxpayer here in Arlington Heights, and I know my taxes are going up, but how much? If the NFL is putting in $500 million or something like that, that would be
well. That's an interesting number, because I don't know the exact number,
mm-hmm.
but there is a fund
mm-hmm.
that the NFL uses for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's technically a loan.
Yeah.
Is it a forgiven loan? I don't know the answer to that. And I think, and I'm throwing a dart at the wall here, Aldo, so you
mm-hmm.
might want to do your research.
I will.
But it's in the area of $400-500 million.
Mm. Well, that would help, because Ravi.
The one question was, do the McCaskies have the money? The team's worth $5.8 million on paper. They got the freaking money.
Yeah.
All you got to do is go to the bank and say, I need such and such.
Yeah, exactly. They have access to the funds. There's no doubt about it. The challenge is going to be, of all the sons and daughters who are on the board, are they going to be, are they going to agree to access that money?
Now when you look at the names on the board of directors,
mm-hmm.
the McCaskey names,
mm-hmm.
every single one of them, and there was word out a couple weeks ago that Virginia, may be ill or not feeling great, and if something, God forbid, happens to her, what's going to happen to ownership?
Mm-hmm.
The McCaskies that are on the board of directors, and it's not the whole family, it's part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is going to change with them. I 100% positive of that. Could there be a sibling or two that may want to cash out? I mean, that's a possibility. We don't have the answer to that,
mm-hmm.
but I'm sure these things are all thought out and solved before they ever happen.
Right.
And I think some of this goes back. Ed McCaskey passed away when I was working there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, a lot of this got taken care of then,
mm-hmm.
or shortly thereafter. Okay, so if mom goes, what's going on? They own 80% of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what happens is there something in place that if child number 4 wants to cash out, can they in fact cash out? And whatever, what the league doesn't want, and this is an interesting thing because it's relatively new within the league. Every team has to have on file with the league successor if something happens to the owner. Okay, now Virginia is the owner in name, but I know when I worked for the Giants, and I'm sure it's the same way with the McCaskies, Wellington Mara was the owner, but every one of those kids already had a share of the team.
Mm.
It was in, but the voting stock was dad. And those, now they're all siblings. John Mayer's got the vote of all the other siblings,
Mm-hmm.
but they each got a piece of the team when it comes to the value of the team. So, there's got to be some sort of paper agreement in writing that if somebody wants to relinquish their rights, that the rest of the family will buy it up for X amount of dollars.
Gotcha. All right, let's close. Excuse me. Let's close our show with you. You mentioned early in the show that you really believe the Bears are going to win this game against the 49ers. As all athletes visualize how this game is going to turn out. So paint a picture for me as to how the Bears are going to win this game. And if you want to predict a score, a thereabout score, people in the chat room are already sending in their score predictions. But I want to know, I want to get, a picture.
I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that. I'll tell you one, before we got on, I looked at the forecast.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to rain.
Ooh, nice for the Bears.
58% chance of rain.
Mm.
If it light, heavy, I don't know. It's only Tuesday, and
sure,
the forecast will change 5 times between now and Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
58% chance of rain on Sunday. This far out could be 100% chance later in the week, or it could be 20%.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be a relatively close game. I look for the defense to be very good and give Trey Lance a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's what this new offensive line could do against a pretty good defensive line of San Francisco. From the offensive side, that's going to tell. And I'm sure they're going to give, wherever Bosa is lined up, being on the left side or the right side, they're going to have it set up that those guys that Borum and Braxton Jones are getting some help.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not every play, but on some plays, either their back's going to stay in, or they're going to have a lot of 12 personnel and use 2 tight ends and use a tight end to chip on Bosa first before they go off into the flat. That type of situation. But, you go back to last year, and the Bears lost the game in a game they very well should have won.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a bad Bears team. This team is more disciplined. And I think the offense is going to be 1,000 times better. Granted, this is going to be the first game, but from what I've seen, there's certain people on Twitter that are saying save those receipts. And I guarantee you they are, because they're going to throw them out at these people,
Mm-hmm.
within the next few weeks.
Yeah, I agree with that. And boy, we only got, I think, one prediction in the chat room for the 49er victory. Everybody is really high and has high expectations for a week 1 victory. I really hope that's the case. I do think that this is going to be one of those games where you are probably going to see a lot of running the ball. You're probably going to see a lot of bubble screens, and that's where hopefully we'll get explosive plays. But the great thing about bubble screens is you get those cornerbacks that come in closer and closer and closer, and then all of a sudden Velus Jones is behind you and is wide open for long scores. So I'm hopeful that it'll be a 24-17 type of game. I am a little bit worried about the defense. The defense of the Bears, only because this is their first game together. There's just been so many missing pieces in preseason.
Well, if they hadn't played so damn good in the offense, they might, or in the preseason, they might have been with you. But they shut down everybody they played in the preseason.
True. Very true. So we'll see. And Greg, this has been so fantastic to get back together. We're approaching the 100-minute mark. So a 100-minute show as the first one of the season, and we'll have plenty more. Greg and I might be back. If there's some big breaking news this week prior to the game, we might be back.
Oh, there's one thing we didn't talk about.
Please, let's do it.
Oh, we'll go a couple more. Asamelli.
Oh, yes. Yes, I had that in my notes. Yes.
Yeah, everybody. When are they going to sign him? I don't think they're going to sign him. And if they do, it won't be until after this week.
Mhm.
But number one, there's some connection he has with Ryan Poles. The last time he played football was 2 years ago in Kansas City. So, Poles was there. So there's a personal relationship between Poles and Osamelli. Couple things, you look for little things. He comes in here for a workout. The next day,
Mhm.
he puts up a video of him lifting, doing deadlifts. I'm ready.
Hmm.
Well, if the Bears were going to sign him, why would he have to do that?
Interesting.
And I just think, you bring in players usually one day a week.
Mhm.
Most days it's Tuesday. Most times it's Tuesday. You bring in players. It's to get your short list going, get medicals on some people,
Mhm.
whatever, and just to see where they are, what type of condition they're in, if they're fits to play within this scheme offensively and defensively. Like I said, Tuesdays are usually the day around the league that's done. Doesn't have to be on Tuesday, but that's the predominant day around the league. I
Mhm.
think this was a case of them doing due diligence. But from the standpoint of signing him, if they in fact did, I think they'd sign him to the practice squad, much like Dallas did
Mhm.
yesterday
Mhm.
with the tackle who was here last year, and then with Peters, and then get him up to speed, because if he is on the active roster, any veteran, any vested veteran on the active roster this Sunday, his salary is guaranteed for the whole year.
Mhm.
Where if he comes in week 2, it's week to week.
There you go.
So it makes a big difference. So why? And then last reason, Bears
Mhm.
are starting to get a little low on money.
Yeah.
And last time I looked, they had a little over $7 million in cap space, and that was after assuming the contract of the guy from the Raiders.
Mhm.
And I was going to say Lightfoot, but that's the mayor, Leatherwood. and you need to have $5-6 million in space just to get through the season. You're paying your practice squad close to $4 million over the course of the season.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, and you got to have money for injuries, that type of thing. Or if you cut people and then you got to, somebody's not playing up to speed where you want them, and then you're going to take a cap hit because you got to cut them, all sorts of things. So it wouldn't shock me if you have another restructure go on
Mhm.
sometime in the next few weeks, or change some bonus money to, or rather some salary to bonus money, just to free up some cash space, because you've got to have quite a large chunk of money just to operate.
Mhm. Would you be surprised if they, late in the season, before that deadline of signing or extending contracts, which I think is usually around week 9, 10, 11, somewhere around there, would you be surprised if they extended contracts to players like, or a player like David Montgomery, or maybe even Roquan Smith, or some of the other guys who are on their last year contracts? Or do you think that this management team is probably going to wait till the end of the season?
Well, number one, you got to have the space to do it.
Right.
Okay, so if you have the space to do it and you found yourself committed to the player, then yeah, why not do it?
Mm-hmm.
But again, you've got to have the cap space available to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a two-way street. And like I said, the last time I looked, they had a little over 7 million,
Mm-hmm.
and that gives you about $1 million, $1.5 million of cap space right now. Now that some of that stuff could still change.
Sure.
Depending on restructures and whatever. So I know next year there's going to be a lot of money available. You could theoretically make some deals with people and not sign a deal until next year, until the new league year starts, when that cap space is going to be available. But again, I mean, that's going to be up to Ryan Poles, Cliff, and Flus.
All right. Greg, it's been fun. Anything else you want to share before we lock the doors on this? I think this is like our 100th episode together. I gotta look at the numbers, but we've been doing this.
Don't I have an automatic escalator in my contract then?
Let me look at that. I'll have to get back to you on that. I love it.
What do you got? A play-by-play sheet there or something to look like?
Right.
Does it say BU on the back?
This is my handy Senior Bowl. I don't know why I still have that, but I'm putting my notes on the back. I recycle paper all the time, so gotta stretch every penny out. Greg, you're the absolute best. People so complimentary of that. This is their favorite Bears talk show, and that's because of you, Greg.
That's nice to hear.
You're fantastic, and so again, we might be back later in the week if news allows. But next Tuesday, we will definitely do a show, and it will be a detailed look at the Bears' performance and look ahead for the other 16 regular season games that they will have.
And I'll just put out the disclaimer right now. I might be on painkillers, so I'm not going to be responsible for anything that comes out of my mouth next Tuesday.
Well, you did great today. You didn't swear a single time.
No, I swore a couple times.
Oh, did you? I missed it then.
A couple times, but not bad.
Well, next week under painkillers, we'll see how you react.
Well, we'll see if I'm even on them. I don't know. I don't know how painful this process will be. Other than when I think about it, it's painful.
That's right. Well, enjoy the drugs, and we'll see you all next week. And I want to say to everybody, thank you for the well wishers on my mom. And with that, I will.
Every time I look at that picture, although I say, "Where'd you come from?" That's a good looking lady now.
She was a gorgeous woman, and that's exactly how she wants to be remembered. Flaunting her curvy hair and curvy figure as well. She loved to pose for the camera. Good woman. And thank you all again for your best wishes. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.